A mother and her two young children are dead. Their killer is still on the loose. Take a look at this house, located on a street with low traffic. It is almost indistinguishable from other houses in the area. It looks like a quiet and peaceful place. However, the locals still cannot forget what happened in this house in 2012. I have two little ones the same age, and I couldn't even imagine what happened here, one neighbor said. Heather Jackson and her two children lived here when one day Heather stopped answering her phone. Her friends and mother became worried and called the police. The officer who arrived knocked on the door, looked through the windows, and, not seeing anything suspicious, left. But friends knew not answering the phone was out of character for Heather. There were other alarming signs. They kicked down the door and went inside, after which they had to call 911. So, today we'll discuss the shocking triple homicide in Sandusky, Ohio. Before moving on, don't forget to subscribe to Underworld Exposé and click the notification bell. Without further ado, let's get started. In 2012, Heather Jackson was 23 years old. She had two children, 3-year-old Selena and 1-year-old Wayne Jr. When Heather found this house on a quiet street just a mile from Lake Erie, she was happy. Her life was not easy. She had recently separated from her husband, Wayne, and they were going through a divorce. Heather and Wayne were once a truly happy couple. He was her high school sweetheart. However, the difficulties they faced after becoming parents destroyed their marriage. Eventually, Heather had a hard time after breaking up with Wayne, but she didn't despair and tried to do everything possible to make her children happy. At 2:30 p.m. on September 8, 2012, Heather's close friend, Danielle Surrell, went to her house as they had agreed to meet. Danielle knocked on the door, but no one opened it. She went around the house and checked all the doors, but they were all locked. It seemed strange to her that Heather and her children were not at home because they had agreed to meet. And even if Heather had suddenly changed her plans, she would have warned about it. So, Danielle called Heather's mother, Jody. Jody was very close with her daughter. They talked on the phone daily, but she couldn't reach Heather that day either. Danielle called all of Heather's friends, but no one knew where she might be. But then Danielle noticed Selena's pacifier lying on the porch. She became even more worried because she knew Heather would never leave the house with the children without taking a pacifier. A few more hours passed, but Heather still didn't call her mother back. Jody was very nervous and had a bad feeling. Therefore, she called the police and asked them to do a welfare check. The officers arrived at the specified address and knocked on the door, but no one answered. Then they went around the house and looked in the windows, but did not notice anything suspicious. There were no signs of forced entry or other signs of foul play. They had no grounds to enter the house without a warrant, so they left. At about 7:30 p.m., Heather's friends Thomas Hansen and Dan Reisner arrived at her house after learning that she was missing. They knocked on the front door, but no one opened it. Reisner went to the back porch, forced open the door, and entered the home. They found Heather's naked body in the bedroom and immediately called 911. "Okay, I'm at the back and there's a body, a person's body, a deceased person," Reisner stammered. Sergeant Eric Guile, a Sandusky police officer, responded to Heather Jackson's residence and entered the home. He found Heather's body wedged between the box, spring, and mattress in her bedroom, with a ligature around her neck. The TV in the house was still on, but the children were not there. Their room was empty. While inspecting the house, the officers noticed a door to a utility closet. It was the only place they hadn't checked yet. When Sergeant Eric Guile opened this door, he saw stacked boxes with some things. Looking behind these boxes, the officer found the lifeless bodies of Heather's children. The police immediately cordoned off the crime scene. Never before had local police officers come across something so terrible. They couldn't understand how someone could be so evil as to take the lives of defenseless children. Heather's family and friends were even more devastated after the results of the forensic examination. Here's what the court documents say. Dr. Diana Scala Barnett, Deputy Coroner for Lucas County, conducted the autopsies of the 3 victims. She concluded that Heather Jackson died from ligature strangulation. She noted that Heather's rectum was more open than it normally is after death, which she said indicated that something was most likely introduced in there to keep it open like that at or about the time of her death. Dr. Scala Barnett testified that both Wayne Jackson and Selena Jackson also died from ligature strangulation. She noted that Selena's underwear was rolled up, indicating that the body had been redressed. Selena also had a rectal dilation, similar to her mother's, again indicating that something was in her rectum at or about the time of death. Julie Cox, a forensic scientist at the Bureau of Criminal Investigation, testified that there was seminal fluid on the anal swabs obtained from Selena Jackson. Cox also noticed a stain in Selena Jackson's underwear, so she cut a small portion of that stained area for testing and determined that it contained a sperm cell. So, the police wanted to find the monster responsible for these crimes as soon as possible. Heather lived next to Firelands Regional Medical Center, and investigators hoped the footage from the surveillance cameras installed on this building would help them find the perpetrator. Looking through the CCTV footage, they saw a car driving up to Heather's house at 10:57 p.m. However, it was hard to see anything because the camera was located far from the house, and because of the darkness, they only saw the car's headlights. The car backed into the driveway and stood there for some time. 11 minutes later, at 11:08 p.m., the headlights turned on again and the person behind the wheel drove away. Meanwhile, Thomas Hansen and Dan Reisner, the men who discovered Heather's body, were taken to the police station for questioning. They were interrogated separately, and the first person the investigators talked with was Dan Reisner, since he was the one who called 911. Dan and Heather were friends, and when he found out she was missing, he decided to check her house. Dan had to admit that he had to push the door hard to enter Heather's house. Dan was asked to provide DNA samples to the police since he was in Heather's house when he called 911. He agreed to it without hesitation. After a swab was taken from his mouth, he was let go. The investigators then questioned Thomas Hansen. He said he talked to Heather on the phone the night before and was near her house around 11 p.m. According to him, he drove up to Heather's house in his car but did not enter the house. They chatted for a short while outside her house, and then he headed home. Thus, the investigators found out who was driving the car they saw on the CCTV footage. It was Thomas Hansen. He also said he didn't enter Heather's house that night because she wasn't alone. There was a man in her house whom Hansen knew as Josh. Hansen said the same thing as Reisner. According to him, when he found out that Heather was missing, he went to her house to find out what happened. After taking a sample of his DNA, the police let him go. After that, the police decided to focus their attention on the man who was at Heather's house before her death. This man was identified as Joshua Case. His whereabouts were quickly established, and he was taken to the police station for questioning. When asked about his relationship with Heather, he said he had known her for several years. Josh did not deny that he was at Heather's house that night. He said they watched TV while the children were sleeping in their room. Josh also mentioned that he went to the store to buy breakfast for the children. He returned to the house and stayed there for some time before a friend came to pick him up at about 1 a.m. He admitted that he and Heather had consensual intimate contact. The investigators went to the store where Josh said he bought breakfast for the children and watched the CCTV footage. It turned out that Josh was telling the truth. He entered the store at 11:20 p.m. and did exactly what he said. His testimony was confirmed, but the fact that he was in the store did not negate the possibility that he could be responsible for this terrible crime. He was the last known person Heather had contact with, and it made him the prime suspect. He also provided a sample of his DNA. Laboratory results showed that Thomas Hansen and Dan Reisner had nothing to do with what happened to Heather and her children because their DNA did not match the one found on the bodies. As for Joshua Case's DNA, it matched the DNA on Heather Jackson's body, but did not match the samples taken from her children's bodies. It meant there was another man in the house that night. Josh had previously admitted that he was in an intimate relationship with Heather, and this explained the presence of his DNA on Heather's body. But now the police had to look for another person whose DNA would match the one found on the bodies of all three victims. The investigators quickly excluded Heather's husband, Wayne, with whom she was going through the divorce process, from the list of suspects because he lived in another state. The detectives hoped they would find answers in Heather's cell phone records. When they received the report, they saw that Heather was very active on her phone, including on the night she died. The last conversation she had on the phone took place at 3:12 a.m. and lasted 30 seconds. Now the police needed to find out who that phone number belonged to. 36 hours after Heather's death, the police obtained another CCTV footage. While analyzing it, the investigators saw a white car driving up to her house at about 3 a.m. It coincided with the time when Heather stopped using her phone, and maybe it wasn't just a coincidence. The officers also saw that this white car drove away about an hour later. Heather, Selena, and Wayne were probably already dead by this time. The footage quality did not allow the police to see the license plates of this car. However, they were able to determine that it was a Cadillac. After the investigators received information from the phone company about the owner of the phone number Heather had called before her death, they had a name. It belonged to 41-year-old Curtis Clinton. It was with him that Heather had that 30-second phone conversation at 3:12 a.m. A background check on Curtis Clinton revealed disturbing information. According to the police, Clinton was released from prison in February after serving 13 years for 2 counts of felonious assault and involuntary manslaughter. He pleaded guilty to the April 1997 death of Misty Keckler, 18, of Fostoria. Misty Keckler was found strangled, naked, and face down in the bathtub with her hands and feet tied. It was similar to what happened to Heather, and the fact that Clinton was released from prison just 6 months before Heather and her children's death also raised concerns among investigators. Perhaps he went back to his old ways once he was released. Moreover, Clinton owned a white Cadillac. Thus, Curtis Clinton became the main suspect, and the police needed to find him as quickly as possible. After all, if he really took the lives of Heather and her children, then he had to be stopped before he hurt anyone else. The officers went to Clinton's last known address, but he wasn't there. A few hours later, a patrolman found a white Cadillac on one of the streets, but Clinton himself was nowhere to be found. They searched the car and found a receipt issued at a gas station on the night of the crime. The investigators went to the gas station to view the CCTV footage. On the recordings, they saw both Clinton and his white Cadillac. He bought water and beer and behaved calmly. By this time, Heather and her children were already dead. The investigators were afraid that Clinton might have gone on the run. However, they soon received information that a patient named Curtis Clinton had been admitted to one of the hospitals. They immediately went there and found the person they were looking for. He was arrested and taken to the police station, but Clinton denied any involvement in the deaths of Heather Jackson and her children. Clinton stated that he had been dating Heather for 5 months and that they had an intimate relationship. He said that Heather had a lot of problems and she asked him for financial and emotional support. Clinton claimed that he didn't know Heather's children well. He said that he had last seen Heather on Thursday, September 6th. Allegedly, he gave her $328 that day, and they entered into an intimate relationship. The investigator informed Clinton that phone records showed he had spoken with Heather at 3:12 a.m. on September 8th. Clinton then said he had his days mixed up and that it had not been Thursday night, but Friday night or early Saturday morning when he had last seen Heather. He said he had not stayed long at her house. He had dropped the money off, and then they had intimate contact. He said, "I did my thing and left." He was not sure what time he arrived home. Clinton claimed that someone else must have gone to Heather's house after he left. He said that while he was with Heather, she mentioned that somebody had texted or called her, and she seemed irritated. Clinton said, "I didn't do nothing to her, and no, I didn't do nothing to her kids, so that's my statement." When informed that he was the last person who had contact with Heather, Clinton said, "I don't think so. I doubt it. I really doubt it. If something happened, I don't remember it." Later, he repeated, "I ain't done nothing." However, the examination indicated the opposite. The DNA on the bodies of all 3 victims belonged to Curtis Clinton. Therefore, he was arrested and placed in the county jail. While there, he called his mother. That phone conversation was recorded. Here's what the court documents say about this phone conversation. Clinton told his mother he was confused and wished he had sought help. He also said, "You should know it would happen again. Now it's even worse than before. I just lose it. I don't know what it is." His mother responded, "I know we all have that issue, but we have learned how to deal with it. We should have really just forced you to go back to your medication." Clinton replied, "I thought I was just over it. I just wouldn't believe that expletive would happen no more." Then Clinton said, "I'm going to go in there and plead guilty or whatever, and just let them do whatever they want to me." Curtis Clinton was charged with multiple counts. During the investigation, it also turned out that 6 days before the death of Heather and her children, Curtis Clinton attacked a 17-year-old girl whose identity was not disclosed by the police. He choked her and forced her to have intimate contact with him. When he let her go, she went to the hospital and the police. At the hospital, doctors took DNA samples from her body, which also led to Curtis Clinton. Clinton moved for a change of venue, arguing that extensive media coverage had saturated the county at the time of the offenses and was likely to resume once the trial started. The The trial court denied the motion for a change of venue. The court rejected claims of presumed prejudice, stating, "While in the present case the pre-trial publicity is extensive and adverse to the defendant, the publicity is not sufficiently prejudicial that readers and viewers could not realistically shut it from sight." He didn't hesitate to take the lives of Heather, Selena, and Wayne, and don't forget about the results of the forensic medical examination and what he did to Selena before she died. His DNA was found inside her body. He knew that he was facing the death penalty, but he did not want to die and therefore did everything to achieve a different outcome of this trial. He even remembered what justice was. When allowed to speak before being sentenced for the capital crimes, Clinton neither begged for his life nor apologized to the victim's family. Instead, he lashed out at prosecutor Kevin Baxter and vowed he would win on appeal and have his case retried. "I don't respect the prosecutor," he stated. "Like I said, I will be back again. I know there's a lot of people who are upset here, but I'm the one who's going through this." The statement triggered disgusted jeers from a few of the 70 people at the hearing. In November 2013, Curtis Clinton was sentenced to death. He received a death sentence for every life taken. But this is not the end of the story. After learning he would face lethal injection for the brutal murders of Heather Jackson and her 2 young children, Curtis Clinton reacted violently to Heather's brother, who said he would rather have Clinton die in prison at the hands of other inmates. Deputies and court staff surrounded the handcuffed Clinton and pushed him into a chair, while other officers restrained Nick Fee as they shouted profanities at each other in the Erie County courtroom, which was packed with relatives and friends of Heather Jackson and Misty Keckler, whom Clinton murdered in 1997. Heather's brother was furious, saying, "The only thing you should thank God for is they saved your life by putting your worthless expletive on death row. I'd love to come over there and stomp your worthless teeth in, but I ain't being away from my family and my kids. Be glad you are on death row where my buddies can't find you. I wish they had gave you life in prison. I begged for it, begged to save your worthless life so my friends could get you. If I get my way, they still will." In accepting the jury's recommendation 2 days earlier for the death sentence, Judge Tig Tone said the aggravated circumstances of the crimes outweigh any mitigating factors. The judge also sentenced Clinton to an additional life in prison, without parole, for what he did to 3-year-old Selena before strangling her. Plus, Clinton received another 10 years in prison for assaulting a 17-year-old girl 6 days before the death of Heather and her children. In September 2018, the execution of Curtis Clinton was postponed. The Ohio Supreme Court granted the motion of Curtis Clinton, 47, to stay his execution, which was scheduled for September 15, 2021. The court ruled the stay would remain in effect until exhaustion of all state post-conviction proceedings, including any appeals. Today, Curtis Clinton is still on death row. His sentence was upheld, but he will not be executed in the near future. Ohio has more than 100 prison inmates awaiting execution, but Governor Mike DeWine doubts any will be put to death during the last 3 years of his term. Ohio's last execution was on July 18, 2018. Robert Van Hook was executed for murdering a Cincinnati man he met in a bar. Since then, Ohio has had what's been termed an unofficial moratorium on executions. The governor explained why the state stopped executions by saying, "You know, I don't expect executions before I leave office." He explained that, under Ohio law, lethal injection is the only approved method of capital punishment. Drug companies have warned the state not to use any of their products for executions. DeWine said they could retaliate, which would impact our health department and other departments being able to get the drugs they need to help people in the state of Ohio. So, I've made that clear to the state legislature and told the state legislature that the only way that we could start executions again is if we change the law in the state, which allows executions in ways other than lethal injection. The legislature has not taken any action, and I don't see any indication they're going to. So, what do you think of this tragic story? Feel free to share in the comments. If there's a case you're interested in, let us know, and if you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Underworld Exposé. Stay safe, and we'll see you next time.